Hilchos Shar Avos Hatumos Perek Chamishi, the laws of the remaining primary sources of impurity, chapter 5. Again, every chapter or two, it's going to be a new topic, because we're just talking about different categories of primary sources of impurity. And like yesterday, I had the chart to kind of show you the progression. So today, we're adding another one. We had animal carcass, chapter 1 and 2. We had bird carcass, chapter 3. We had sheretz, yesterday, that's the rodent. And today we move on to another type of primary sources of impurity, which is called shichvat zera, or zera for short, semen. Semen transmits impurity, and there's a lot of laws about it. So that's what we're going to be focused on in today's chapter. It says that Rambam halacha aleph, shichvat zera av me avos hatuma. The semen itself is a primary source of impurity. And take a look so you can see the contrast of how it transmits impurity. Mitama adam v'kelim b'maga. It transmits impurity to people and utensils that contact it directly. Uklicheres ba'avir. If it goes into the airspace of a pottery utensil, it makes that airspace impure, makes that utensil impure. However, ve'eno mitama b'masa. It doesn't make you impure with carrying. So in that way, it's similar to a sheretz. The animal has even more. The animal has contact, and it has carrying and airspace. The bird is on its own category in general, it's only swallowing. The sheretz is just maga and cheres, so too is zera. And like the sheretz as well, while you're touching the semen, you don't become a conductor. If you're touching something else, the tumor doesn't go through you. The impurity is contracted whether you're touching semen from outside of you or you see it yourself. It exits your flesh. In both cases, the person becomes first degree impurity because the semen itself is the av. Anything which an av touches becomes a rishon, so you become a rishon. The kama shiura, how much is the amount to transmit impurity? So if you see the last couple of cases, they all have one amount. Animal is an olive-sized portion, so is a bird. Sheretz is a lentil. Here, it depends. Lanoigeya b'ka'adosha, v'loroya b'kolshehu. If you're touching other semen, then you must touch a lentil size. If it's your own, even the slightest amount. Slightest amount makes you impure. The ein haraya tamei, one who sees semen is not impure, ad sheteitze mimenu v'yechasem pi ha'ama, until it exits his body and it seals the mouth of the reproductive organ. How do we know this? Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, asher teitze mimenu shichva zara. This is actually in the context of truma, but we use it in application of impurity as well. Torah doesn't just say somebody who sees shichva zara, somebody who it exits from him. He uses the word teitze. V'nemar, and then in the original context of the tuma of semen, what does it say? Oy hechtim b'sarei, or his flesh was sealed. So it has to cover the organ. Lefikach, therefore, afilu ra'a b'kisam. Even if ra'a b'kisam means even if a person saw semen on a little toothpick, let's call it. So basically, he inserted it into his organ, and it didn't exit his flesh, and it never touched the mouth of the organ. Nevertheless, once it reaches the area of the mouth of the organ, it becomes impure. A person is impure whether he sees this sighting of semen naturally or because of a circumstance outside of his control. Maybe he ate too much, he drank too much, certain things that can bring to this experience. Like we have before Yom Kippur, you're supposed to avoid eating foods that are going to bring you to have a seminal emission. So you see that there are certain circumstances from the outside that can make you have this experience. Either way, you're impure. Halacha beis, ein shichva zera shel katan metama, the semen of a child does not transmit impurity ad sheyeh ben tishanim b'yem echad, till he reaches the age of 9 years old, when it's called viable. Halacha gimel, shichva zera aduma tahira. If it has a reddish tinge, it's pure. Ad shetiyah levana v'nimsheches, until it's white, and nimsheches means like it has to have like a texture that is not like watery, more sticky essentially. Halacha dalid v'chol shichva zera she'ein kol gufa shel adam margish ba, any semen which wasn't felt by the entirety of the body, eina mitama. It does not make a person impure, because we consider it to be non-potent semen or liquid. Lefikach, therefore, imra b'lei kishrei v'lei taiva. Person sees semen without an erection, without any desire. Ein mitama mishum shichva zera. It doesn't transmit impurity. It's not called the Torah's shichva zera. Doesn't meet that qualification. Nekra b'hargasha. If it dislodged within his body under a symptom, afal pisha yatzas shalei b'hargasha, even though it left his body with no symptom, with no feeling, tmeya, the semen itself is still impure. Halacha hey hamaharer balayla. Let us say somebody had a dream at night, v'ra sheshimesh mita or mitasei b'chaloim, and in a dream he sees himself having relations. V'amad, he wakes up from the dream, v'nimtza b'sarei cham, and he feels that his flesh, his organ, is hotter than usual. Even if he doesn't find any semen upon examination in his clothing, he has to consider himself to be impure. Because by default, if he had relations in a dream, that means that his body experienced a sighting with symptoms. That's why he found his flesh to be hot when he woke up. And we say the reason why he didn't find this because it was very little. And it obviously got cleaned off onto his flesh or onto his clothing. Therefore he didn't find any moisture. What if he had the dream, but he didn't find his flesh to be hot? Or he just found himself to be hot with no dream. Tahir, he's pure. Because the only way we can tell you what happened is if both factors were true. There was a dream and a physical feeling of heat. Halacha vav, hamatil mayim, if somebody is urinating, mayim chalakin, oy achurim, and he sees chalakim would be like smooth, like an oily texture of urine, or achurim means a little bit murky, not clear. So you have to know when it happened. Bitchila, if this off color or off texture came in the beginning of the urination, tahir, that is pure. We just say that it's regular urine. The reason why it has a funny texture or a funny shape, a funny color is because he probably held himself in, or whatever. Didn't let himself go to the bathroom right away. But if he sees this murky texture in the middle of the urination or at the end, that's a category of a seminal emission, and it makes you impure. If all the urine that you expelled from the beginning to the end had this oily texture or was murky, that's pure. Because again, that's simply a fluke that happened to the urine because of a certain circumstance. If it was white, but it was more sticky, then you're impure, even though it feels like a regular urination, because obviously there's some kind of at least mixed in semen, not just urine. If a person expels thick drops from the reproductive organ, not like typical urine which goes out in a stream, tahir, he's pure in any scenario, even if he saw them only in the middle or at the end of a urination, because the thick drops have no connection to a seminal emission. Halacha zayin balkeri. Balkeri is the name for a person who experiences an emission. That's what he's called, balkeri. And the halacha of a balkeri is that he's not pure, obviously, till he goes to the mikveh. Shataval. So let's say he went to the mikveh, and he didn't urinate before going to the mikveh. Unfortunately for him, the next time he urinates, he's going to be impure. Because every time, at least rabbinically, because every time you have an emission, we say it doesn't fully clean out till the next time you urinate. The remainders, the remnants of the semen won't go out till you urinate. So you should have rather waited till you go to the bathroom and then go to the mikveh. When do we say this? Only if a person is naturally weak, sick, or old. But a young, healthy person is actually tahir in this scenario. Even if he doesn't go to the bathroom between the emission and the mikveh, he's actually pure. Because young, healthy people emit semen. It's called shoots like an arrow, strongly. And naturally speaking, if he's healthy, it'll all exit his reproductive organ, and nothing will remain. Interesting halacha here. Ad kama hu yelet. How long, according to the Torah, is a person considered to be young? For this, kol zman she'oimid al ragle achas v'noyel oicheletz minole. As long as he can stand on one foot and put on or remove his shoe. And this is not necessarily the shoes that we have today. And I put in the picture of the shoes that we have today, but it's probably the shoes of yesteryear where they used to have just a sole and you needed to take the straps and wrap them all around up your leg, which is much more difficult task than just putting on a shoe. But definitely, this is somewhat of an indicator to your age. If you can put on your shoes with one foot, standing up, you're still young and strong. Once you can't, it's already a little bit old.
No, but there's a universal test right now.
This is a real thing scientifically.
It's a real scientific thing, yeah.
The sock test.
The
okay?
sock test, yeah.
Ephraim is telling us that
shoes
nowadays
are
they use this test even today, at least not with shoes, but with socks.
Well, that's what it is.
If you can put your socks on standing up,
you can put like one sock.
You're more healthy.
One sock on at a time.
One sock on at a time. Fascinating. So putting on one shoe, standing up, is a sign of strength. If you can't do that because you're weak, at least for this matter, you're considered sick. Okay, we're not going to classify you as a chayla in halacha.
I'm young. I can do
You're young?
I have no problem.
Very good.
I can do it in my sleep all day.
Tells you that you're young. When I was in New York, we used to see in the mikveh these old people. They used to test themselves if they're old or not. They could put on one shoe in the mikveh standing up, and they're young. If not, they're old. Halacha ches. Now we're going to transfer for a minute to a woman's relationship with semen. V'chol isha sheshimsha mitasa. Any woman who engages in relations, v'yarda v'tavla koydem shetakaneach atzma, and she goes to the mikveh before cleaning her area, yafa very well. Harehi betum asa. She's considered to be impure, as if there was no mikveh at all, because there's no doubt that there's semen still inside of her system, and it's considered to be an intervening substance for mikveh. Halacha tes echad ish ve'echad isha sheshimshu mitasan. Whether a man or a woman who engage in relations, shneim tmeim, they become impure. Ushneim rishen l'tuma din taira, and they're both considered first-degree impurity with regards to biblical law. This is another example of how we see how foreign this law is to us today. Every time a person engaged in relations, back in the day, the next day you have to go to the mikveh because of the contact with the semen. Now the Rambam immediately clarifies, Ve'eina isha tmeya mishum negas b'shichva zera. Do not think, and maybe I misspoke before, do not think that a woman is impure on account of touching the semen. Shenegias beis hastarim eina negia. I've said a few times already. Touching on the inside of your bodily system, in the cavity, is not called touching. Ella hameshameshes harehi kereya keri. It's a Torah decree. It's called Gzeras HaKosov, that when a woman engages in relations, she's considered to like the person who has seminal emission. Provided she's 3 years minimum and up. Shenemar, because the verse from which we learn this says, my Rambam has Asher Yishkav Ish Es Isha. But really, in the Torah it says, V'ish Asher Yishkav Es Isha. When a man will lie with a woman. So the wording Asher Yishkav teaches that she has to be fit for relations, which is minimum 3 years old. If she's younger than that, she doesn't become impure by the act of relations itself. But if it happens that the semen contacted her on her body on the outside, she will become impure. Which, by the way, is the same as true for an adult woman as well. If it happens to be that any other part of her body comes in contact with the semen, she is going to be impure. The Rambam is just saying, in a classic case, even if not, there's a Gzeras HaKosov that she's impure anyways. Lefikach, therefore, since the whole impurity of relations is a Gzeras HaKosov by divine decree, if somebody were to have a relation with a woman, adult woman, in the unnatural way, not vaginally, tahira, she's pure. Because the only time Torah imposes this decree of impurity is only in the natural way, not in the unnatural way. A person engages in relations but did not ejaculate. Tahir, he's pure, afal pi shehera, even though he inserted the organ inside her. And so to the woman, the biblical imposition of becoming impure only comes into effect once the man ejaculates. A woman who had relations, and after a while her body expels the semen. If she expels it within 3 oinos, and we'll soon see that an oina is basically either a night or a day, counts as an oina. So 3 oinos would be either 2 days and 1 night or 2 nights and 1 day from the day that she had relations, and we'll soon talk about this. She becomes impure like a person who has a seminal emission. This is an additional concept. Besides for the impurity of relations, if she then expels it later, she becomes impure again. Lefikach, therefore, says the Rambam, if she were to be a zava, she would have to destroy one day from her count. What does this mean? We remember that if a woman's calendar is divided into 7-11 patterns, 7 days of nida, 11 days of ziva. If she sees blood for 3 days, in the ziva days, she becomes what's called a zava gedola, and before she can resume relations, she has to count 7 clean days. Now, let us say, for sake of example, that she had relations maybe over here. Okay? And while she still had 2 sightings, she's still what's called a zava kitana. So technically she shouldn't have, but she was able to have relations, at least in a hanging in the balance way. So she did. And then later on, over here, some semen exits her body. So this day will not count as a clean day. And she must start a 7-day count again. Ki ishara kari, like a person who sees a seminal emission during his count of 7 clean days for being a zav. Umitama b'kol shehu, and this tuma of expelling semen is even at the slightest amount, like a man who sees the semen. Afal pisha leyatzas lachutz ela nekra v'higia leben hashinayim. It goes even further, even if it didn't leave her body actually. It just was dislodged from the inside of the womb and came into the area that's known as bein hashinayim. There's somewhat of a debate exactly where this is, but it's basically further out the vaginal canal. Nitma, she becomes impure. Shari shichva zera kedama, because the semen is treated like her blood. Ma dama mitame bifnim, av shichva zera shetiflait, tetame esa bifnim. The same way blood makes her impure on the inside once it's dislodged, so does semen that she's expelling, even if it's on the inside, but dislodged, makes her impure. Halacha yud beis, shichva zera atzma sheniflata b'seicha shalosh, oinois, the semen itself, that exited the man into the woman. Now the woman is expelling it. If it's within those 3 oinois, the 2 days and 1 night, 2 nights and 1 day period, mitama achedim shenaguba, it will make other people impure as well if they touch it. Kederech shetima ha'isha shepalta, so the same way it made the woman impure. And that's because, according to rabbinic tradition, during the first 3 oinois after semen is emitted, it's still potent. The impolta achar shalish oinois, but if she would have expelled it after those 3 periods of time, the woman is pure and the semen is pure. After those 3 oinois, it's called impotent. It loses its form. How long is an oina? Either a day or a night. But the period of day when the relations happen doesn't count. So you begin from the next point, either the next night or the next day, whatever's first, as the Rambam now defines. Ketzat. What does this mean? Nivala b'leili Shabbos. A woman has relations on Friday night. The Rambam picks this example because it's typical for Torah sages to have relations on Friday night. They weren't home all week; they were very busy with their studies. So a woman has relations on Friday night. So the whole Friday night doesn't count for the count. Shalish Einis Shalah, her 3 periods of time will be Yom HaShabbos, V'Leil Echad B'Shabbos, V'Echad B'Shabbos. Shabbat day, Saturday night, the night going into Sunday, and Sunday day. If she'll expel the semen during that time, it'll be impure, and she'll be impure. If it's after that, Sunday night and going forward, it'll be pure and she'll be pure. If a person engaged in homosexuality, and then his body expelled the semen that he absorbed, even after many periods of time, he'll still be impure. Kolzman shehilacha, as long as it's still moist. Because the idea of 3 oinois only applies in a woman's system, not in a man. And the person himself who expelled the semen becomes impure. Halacha Yudalid, we return now to the chart to see another qualification about zera. Shichva zera eina metama ela kishihilacha. Shichva zera only imposes impurity when it's moist. Yavsha kecheres tahira. Once it dries, hard as pottery, it's pure. But, like we had the last couple of days, the 24-hour test. If you can soak it for 24 hours in water, and it'll become moist as it used to be, then it's actually impure. We already explained in this chapter that a man who has seminal emission, And a woman who engages in relations, carnally. And a person who touches semen. These are all impure biblically. Those three. So to a woman who expels semen during the three periods of time. From the relations, also impure biblically. Like a man who has a seminal emission. But those are the only ones that have biblical impurity. And all the other people you mentioned that are all impure, like a person who had the dream of having relations, and the urination, all that stuff, these are all only rabbinic impositions of impurity. They're only considered impure insofar as touching truma. That if they touch it, it becomes disqualified, you can't eat it. But if they were touch regular chulin produce, they'd actually be considered pure. It doesn't have a level of impurity. Tezayin. Nochris shepolta shichva zera shel Yisrael. You got to address all questions. Non-Jewish woman, unfortunately, has relations with a Jewish man, and then she expels his semen. During the 3 periods of time when it's still potent. Or a Jew engaged in bestiality, and the animal expelled the semen which it absorbed. During that time. So of course the non-Jewish woman and the animal have no status of impurity, but the semen itself is impure because it's Jewish semen. If they expelled it after that time, now it's a doubt whether or not it becomes impotent or not. And therefore all the laws of doubtful tumah apply to it. Halacha Yud Zayin. We already explained in the last set of laws that a Gentile's semen is totally pure. Therefore, if a Jewish woman unfortunately had relations with a non-Jewish man and then she expels his semen, even within the 3 periods of time, she's pure. A Gentile begins to feel symptoms of semen approaching. Don't ask me why, but right in the beginning of this, right in the middle of this, he decides to do a conversion. Goes to the mikveh. And after the mikveh, the semen exits his body, after the immersion. Now he's a doubt whether he is impure. Because even though we explained before that when the semen dislodges, and even if it comes out afterwards with no symptoms, you're impure, but that may be just astringency. Here, this will become a leniency. Because if we go after the dislodging time, that means he was a Gentile and we won't consider it to be impure. So we don't know. And therefore we leave it in doubt. Halacha Yutes. Gedoyla sheshachav oisa kata. Pachais mentesh hashanim. You have an adult woman who had relations with a child less than 9 years old, whose semen is not viable. Or a Gentile, a behema or an animal. The woman remains pure. Shenemar, because the verse from which we learn, the special Gzeras HaKosov, that a woman becomes impure from relations. What does it say there? Ve'ish asher yishkav es isha. Only if a man lies with a woman. That means ad sheyiyah hashechev ish umi Yisrael kumesh b'yarnu. That implies he has to be a man, at least 9 years old for these contexts, and definitely not an animal, and a Jew, not a Gentile. And therefore, in this case, the woman will remain pure.